Hello, everybody. Hi, Zoe. Hi, Maya. How are you?
Hi, I'm okay. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm making it. I'm alive. That's a good thing most of the time. It's a good thing. My daughters are home, and so Charlotte, I'm going to begin a Zoom, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Should I start screeching at the top of my lungs?
Yeah, please start screeching at the top of your lungs. That's exactly what I want you to. Yeah. Okay, you can stop that. Thank you. Yeah, she's 11. Need I say more? I don't need to say more. What's that supposed to? I think you know what that's supposed to mean. Yeah.
Hey.
Highly recommend having kids. They keep you very humble. Hi, Bianca. How are you? Oh, no, that's Bruna.
Yeah, I was gonna change the name right now.
Oh, yeah? Just so that we didn't get you messed up. But see, I knew.
Yeah,
I knew you were
but
Bruna.
it's okay.
I took one look. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Not Bianca. All right.
How is everybody doing?
I think everybody's doing okay.
That's good.
Elena, how are you doing? It's Elena, right? Not Alana? Elena.
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing good.
Yeah? Okay, good. And if you have your camera and want to turn it on, that'd be great. I would love to see your faces, but you don't have to. You don't have to if that's, but I like seeing Zoe. Oh, yay, Elena, see, now I know what you look like. You're beautiful. I had no idea you were so beautiful. There you go.
Thank you.
It's good to see everybody. All right, so we're going to talk about the end of the novel today and look at some of the questions that I asked and just get your final interpretations and all that good stuff. Let me, sorry. I was just in another meeting and I think I closed out of it, but there's a good possibility I haven't. Who knows? Oh, there goes everybody. Okay. You're just going to ignore that with me. We don't want that. Okay, so the questions that I asked on the discussion boards. Sorry, everybody. See, still kind of involved. Oh, God, stop it, people. All right, so let's take a look at the end. So sorry. Okay, everybody. Yeah. The meeting is ending. Can you tell? Okay. Yes. Go away. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the end. What did you guys think about the end of this novel? Were you shocked by it? Surprised? What do you all think? Was it a good ending for you? I know that we had this debate between The Color Purple and The Handmaid's Tale about endings and closures. What did you all think about the ending of this novel, Middlesex?
I actually really like it, but I got sad that Milt died. But you know, I liked it because it showed a little bit of hope for Cal and Julie. So I think that was really nice.
Yeah, there is a little bit of hope, right? Because Cal was
Yeah.
able to tell Julie, you know, we talked about how that maze metaphor throughout this novel, right? With a minotaur, the minotaur, I don't know how y'all pronounce it. I pronounce it minotaur. That beast that's in the maze, and you have, you know, for all of us, we all have our own mazes, right? We're all kind of lost a little bit. We all have this monster inside of us, a fear that we have, and we feed something to that fear, right? So for Desdemona, she fed her marriage, her love for her husband, to the fear of having these children that might have defects. And we can see Cal, that what he feared, of course, everybody, was that he was the monster, right? That he himself was a monster. And we all talked about in that metaphor, in that myth, how there's a little string in all of our fingers too, right? And sometimes we've got these little, somebody in our life, maybe, hopefully a person in our life, who's tugging at our little finger that maybe can show us the light, that can maybe drag us away from that monster, our fear. and we can stop feeding it and maybe get out of that maze, out of that confusion. And you see that, right, Bruno? You have that little bit at the end of this story that maybe, hey, Brian. Thank you. That maybe Julie can be the string that helps him out. And it's so sweet, isn't it? It's so sweet. I really love that there's a little bit of hope at the end for Cal. And I think that also, you know, I know that before the last time we had our Zoom on Tuesday, that Zoe, you were talking about how you love like the full circle of this novel. And I think that to some degree, one of the reasons why Cal had to explore his own self and had to explore his family's history was to bring that full circle, all of that full circle, so he could have a relationship with Julie and accept himself. Like he had this whole story was really a way for him to make sense of who he is, of his body, and maybe just maybe by doing that, exploring all that, he could be more fully there in a relationship with Julie. So I think that's a beautiful aspect to this novel as well. Let's look at some of the questions I ask. So were all of you surprised when Desdemona just kind of shows up, where you're like, oh yeah, I kind of thought she died or something, right?
I knew that like early on they had mentioned, I knew that she was going to be alive when Cal like going to the visits, and I don't remember why. There was just some mention in the book that like, and later on she would react the same with blah blah blah. So I knew she was still alive, but I did think it was like kind of weird, like as time like went on and on. I was like, I know she's still alive. I know she's still living in that house. Like, did they just forget about her? But when she finally reappeared at the very end, it made a lot of sense for her to be brought back in that moment.
Yeah.
And I kind of mentioned this too in my discussion board post, but for some reason, I did not realize that up until this point, no one knew that Desdemona and Lefty were siblings. I like completely, and it's, you know, because Cal knows the entire time, the narrator knows the entire time, so you just assume like, okay, the family knows. And then when Milton, I don't remember when, but at one point in this reading it was mentioned that like Milton died not knowing that his parents were siblings.
Yeah. In fact, probably not even Tessie knows until this book might be published, you know. So in an interesting way, Zoe, I think that another reason why, you know, because Cal wasn't alive for any of this. I mean, before Cal was born, he writes this from a perspective as if he could hear his grandparents actually talking to each other, as if he was on that boat with them as they cross over, right? It's like it's a really, really interesting perspective. I've never read a novel like this before, where you have this omniscient narrator who's pretending to be around and kind of making up the story, but acting like he's there witnessing his past. Of course he can't be. Like Cal is clearly making this up, right? He's making up how his parents.
I felt like that was confusing.
Yeah. It is. It's weird, right? It's really, really strange. But I find it really beautiful too and interesting because again, he is shaping the narrative of his family in a way for his other family members, right? So like his novel might be a way for him to say, Tess, this, you know, welcome to your family, welcome, you know, and if Milton had lived, welcome to your family. And so even the way that he is writing this story is a reflection of how he wants the story to be read, how he wants the story to go.
Yeah, like you said, I've literally never read a book where the narrator, it's like so hard, it's so weird to describe even to like think about it, but I think the really cool thing is that you can tell like when Cal is writing about like things that happened before he was born and he's basically making up these stories, the way he writes those stories is like very obviously a reflection on like who he is now. And so the things that he chooses to focus on and like the bits of fate that he chooses to talk about are very reflective of like what is important in his life.
Yeah,
I think is.
I know. I have my students do this sometimes in my creative nonfiction writing class is, okay, so interview your parents, ask them how they fell in love. Now write it from the perspective of Cal. Write it like you were there, a fly on the wall witnessing this happen. It's really fun to think about because it gives you a certain like creative license. You crawl into people's, it's not just the facts. Well, this happened. You know, by becoming this fly on the wall type of, and making up the dialogue and making up the feelings, he's crawling into people and empathizing with people in a way that, Zoe, we talked about before, can be seen as really feminine, you know, really, you know, really in like imbuing these characters and the people in his life with this rounded characters and a really, really fleshed out past. And to me, it's a really interesting, again, I've never read anything like it either. You know, it's like, it's both the truth and also completely made up. But this whole novel is both the truth and completely made up. I mean, think about how many things happen in this novel that are absolutely a part of reality and how much of it is fiction. So it's that perfect like mirroring of fact and fiction. And when we think about, again, who we are as people in our own stories, it's that perfect blend between fact and what we make up, you know, our own stories that we're making up as we go along, the story of who we are. You know, if you were going to write about yourself at 2 or 3, Zoe, you'd have to make that crap up, right? You would have to make it up. And your parents don't remember, there's no recording of your life every second of your life. Who we are, we're just walking around, really narratives. That's what we are. We're just a narrative of how our body has changed over time, and our parents' narrative and our grandparents' story. It's really, that's what I love about this novel, because it kind of messes up with this, it really does this blending of reality and fiction in a really, really interesting way. How about the rest of you though? Somebody said that was what was kind of confusing for you.
That was me.
Hi, Lily.
Hi. I found that kind of confusing, going back and forth, shifting, because sometimes I'd have to go back and like reread it to understand who was talking and what perspective like they were saying it from, whether it was past or present.
Yeah, I know. And so this novel is really messing up with those things that we think of are solid and with solid lines between them, like past and present and future. They all get mixed up. And then things like truth and fiction, fate and chance, all of that is just, there's a very thin line between all of that, which is, which can be really confusing because we like, right? But when you think about
like,
Lily,
word for word.
Yeah. But when you think about it, if you were to really follow your own line of thinking, if you were trying to follow your own thoughts during, I don't know, 5 minutes or a half hour or a couple hours or through a day, Lily, how many times are you like not really here now, but thinking about how this connects to the past? Like, oh God, I did that yesterday and that didn't go well. Or, oh, well, I have to do this in the future to do X, Y, Z. Or, I mean, we're never living our lives in a chronological time order, you know? It's always about the past.
Yeah. Like as much as we want that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's never as neat as we want to pretend. Yeah. It's really cool. Okay. But I also know that it's very, very complicated. Here's the truth. This is one of my definitions of literature, and it's what I think it can be really beautiful about literature, is that the pieces of literature that I love the most are the ones where every time I open them up to read them, I'm getting something totally new, you know? And for each of these 3 novels I picked for this class, I really believe that 3 years from now, Elena, if you went back and read The Color Purple 3 years from now, you'd be like, I didn't even see this the first time around. Like there would be another layer that you're uncovering. And same with Middlesex, and same with, you know, especially lately with Handmaid's Tale, you know, I've been teaching this for 10 years and only lately have I been going, you know, like this stuff's coming true. I mean, it's weird, right? And so these novels, what I'm hoping is that you can kind of see the layers of meaning and interpretation. And that's why I also love having these on my tests and essays, because like this past test too, you guys were teaching me how to read The Color Purple. Like I'm reading some of your responses and I'm like, I've never seen it that way before. Like that is so cool because it's so layered and so complex, and you're all taking like the different strands from it, you know? It's really beautiful. It's really, really wonderful stuff. Okay, so what about that last meeting with Desdemona? Why was that such an important meeting for Cal? That last time he spoke with Desdemona that we see. Why was that such a healing experience, do you think?
I would say that Desdemona finally got the burden off her chest. Even though she says that everyone that she knew at the time is dead, she finally got to like apologize for her mistake, because she's been in fear this whole time. Yeah. And when her fears came true, she was like, I'm really sorry. I like, you can tell my story but after I'm dead. Yeah. So I guess it was like a bonding moment.
Yeah, and the fact that she gave him her permission, you know, which is, it's beautiful because she lived with that burden of that secret her whole life. You know, like Zoe, what you're saying, like, imagine that she never told anybody, right? And lived with that burden, lived with that monster, really, her entire life. But she doesn't want her grandson to live with that same burden. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. Kelly, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I believe like it was a bonding and acceptance moment between the two, because like I feel like Desdemona and Cal could relate, because she was hiding something for so long, for, you know, marrying her brother, and it was kind of like Cal was also like hiding something as well, so they were able to relate. And I also kind of wondered like if Desdemona felt like she and her husband / brother were the reason that Cal was the way that he was.
Mm-hmm. She even says that on page 526. She says it's all my fault. Yeah. And she was not crying exactly. Her tear ducts were dried up and no moisture rolled down her cheeks, but her face was going through the motions, her shoulders quaking. And then Cal says something really beautiful, right? He says, no, you know, I'm going to have a good life, right? I'm going to have a good life. And it's I think for both of them, I think you're absolutely right. You all are right. I was seeing it as a way for Cal to heal, but I think Desdemona is healed too through this conversation. And I love the line where she says, my spoon was right, you know? Yeah. This whole thing begins with Desdemona predicting that Cal was going to be a boy. And, you know, she was right. He was going to be, at some point, a boy. Yeah. Very, very beautiful.
And I thought something that was like really beautiful about that scene is that
I don't know if anyone can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes. Was that Mary speaking? Who was speaking?
Oh, it was, yeah. But I don't know if you can hear me. You're going in and out on me.
Yeah, you can. I can hear you. But not
okay. Now. Like what I was just going to say is, I think like Desdemona told him in like regards, so he would like it was him being the monster, you know, like all that changes and stuff that he went through, like he couldn't understand it. So like it eventually made sense to him, like that it wasn't him, like it was actually like something that had happened that had caused this, you know, it wasn't all his fault, if that makes sense. So like in like a weird way, like she told him he could have someone else to blame and not blame himself, and blame himself for like who he was, and maybe beat himself up about it, because they were basically like, you can blame us instead, like it was our fault that this happened to you.
Right. I mean, it's comforting, isn't it? Even if it doesn't answer all the questions, just knowing the reason. You know, my friends who are adopted, they got a certain amount of peace just knowing the reasons why their parents had given them up for adoption. Even though that doesn't answer all the questions, even though that's not, you know, it's still just knowing that can be a healing experience. And so I think you're absolutely right, Mary, that knowing that there was a history and a reason for Cal's condition is another step forward to accepting his body and himself. Absolutely. Let me go ahead and share the screen and get to the next couple of questions. The final sentence, we talked a little bit, I know Bruno was like, I was so sad when Milton died, right? The final sentence of the novel reads, I lost track after a while, happy to be home, weeping for my father and thinking about what was next. How do you all feel about Milton's death? Do you think given the chance he could have accepted Cal as his son? And then what is next for Cal? Are you hoping or are you thinking? Try to, if there are parts of the novel that helped you understand this, let me know.
I think Milton's death was like kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess. So I guess Milton dies, and then that's him dying is the weight of Cal growing into the man he needs to be, I guess. And the second part was what again?
Oh shit, I don't know. Let me see. Let me come back. Yeah. Do you think he would have accepted Cal? And then what's next for Cal, do you think? Because that's you know, it ends with like, I'm ready for what comes next. What do you think is next?
I think Milt would probably be doing the same thing as Tessie's doing. She's like, you're always gonna be my daughter. You're always gonna be my daughter because you've been my daughter for 14 years. I can't just switch it like that. But I will accept what you did. As long as I know that you're safe and you're here with me, he will be okay with it. He'll use the pronouns and stuff, but deep down he's always gonna say that's my daughter.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about how is Tess accepting? Because it's interesting, right? Let me read a couple of passages from the end of the novel, and what's really, really interesting. On page 520. When they embrace, and this is the first time he's seen his mother since becoming a man. Hi, Mom, I'm home, he says. I went forward to meet her. I sat down my suitcase, and when I looked up, Tessie's face had altered. She had been preparing for this moment for months. Her expression was that of a mother watching a doctor remove bandages from a severely burned child. An optimistic, dishonest bedside face. Still, it told me all I needed to know. Tessie was going to try to accept things. She felt crushed by what had happened to me, but she was going to endure it for my sake. And then she says a little bit, don't you think it would have been easier just to stay the way you were? I lifted my face and looked into my mother's eyes, and I told her, this is the way I was, right? And then she goes, you will want to know, how do we get used to things? What happened to our memories? Did Calliope have to die in order to make room for Cal? To all these questions, I offer the same truism. It's amazing what you can get used to. After I returned from San Francisco and started living as a male, my family found that, contrary to popular opinion, gender was not all that important, which is, I know, a little bit ironic in a class that's titled gender. That at the end, we're reading a novel that says, gender really just isn't all that important. My change from girl to boy was far less dramatic than the distance anybody travels from infancy to adulthood. In many ways, I remain the person I'd always been. Even now, though I live as a man, I remain in essential ways Tessie's daughter. I'm still the one who remembers to call her every Sunday. I'm the one she recounts her growing list of ailments to. Like any good daughter, I'll be the one to nurse her in her old age. We will still discuss what's wrong with men. We still, on visits back home, have our hair done together. Bowing to the changing times, right? They go to the same place. I mean, what's really, really interesting to me is that, you know, and this is what a lot of my friends who are transgender express, like they're the same person. You know what I mean? They're the same person. They have the same memories. They perform very similar roles to what they had before. It's just that they're presenting differently. But it doesn't mean everything. Your gender doesn't mean everything about you. Does that make sense, everybody? Like
Yeah.
it's a kind of an interesting, and yeah, Brianna and Kelly, I absolutely agree with you that changing from Calliope to Cal wasn't as dramatic of a shift. And maybe, just maybe for Milton, it wouldn't have been either. Maybe. Although Milton seems a lot more diehard, you know, with his roles and his.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Brianna that it was like a very bittersweet ending, because at first you're like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible. Like Cal was about to come home, like he died for nothing. Terrible, like that grieving process would have been like just filled with like guilt for me and all that stuff. But then when I was thinking about it, and I was like Cal says at one point, like he thinks he would have always remained like Milton's daughter had Milton survived. And I think that's the difference between Milton and Tessie, is that, I mean, both of them come from conservative backgrounds, both of them are seemingly conservative people. But I think when it came, even at the very beginning of like their story, when Tessie wants a daughter, she doesn't want a daughter for like the biological sex part of a daughter. She wants a child who fulfills typical female gender roles. You know, she wants to have that like girl bond with her child. And like Milton, on the other hand, I think it was a lot more about having a biological female as a child. And so I felt like, although neither one of them really got closure from each other, his death still served as good closure.
And let's think about that, because, you know, he wasn't there in the car when Milton died either. He wasn't. That is also Cal as a middle-aged man depicting his father's death in a certain way. And I thought it was really interesting the way that he depicts his father's death, because his father is so Milton all the way up until the time he dies, isn't he? He's just so Milton. And this is how Cal has decided to capture his father. At that moment, Milton began to cry. All of a sudden, his face was wet and he touched it, sniffling and weeping. He slumped back, and because no one was there to see, he opened his mouth to give outlet to his overpowering grief. He hadn't cried since he was a boy. The sound of his deep voice crying surprised him. It was the sound of a bear, wounded or dying. Milton bellowed in the Cadillac as the car began once again to descend. He was crying not because he was about to die, but because I, Calliope, was still gone, because he had failed to save me, because he'd done everything he could to get me back, and still, I was missing. As the car tipped its nose down, the river appeared again. Milton Stephanides, an old Navy man, prepared to meet it. Right at the end, he was no longer thinking about me. I have to be honest and record Milton's thoughts as they occurred to him. At the very end, he wasn't thinking about me or Tessie or any of us. There was no time. As the car plunged, Milton only had time to be astonished by the way things had turned out. All his life, he had lectured everybody about the right way to do things, and now he had done this, the stupidest thing ever. He could hardly believe he had loused things up quite so badly. His last word, therefore, was spoken softly, without anger or fear, only with bewilderment and a measure of bravery. Bird brain, Milton said to himself in his last Cadillac, and then the water claimed him. And it's such a, like Zoe, it's such a bittersweet moment, right? I mean, such a loving portrayal of a complicated man. And you can see Cal kind of wrestling with that, with both portraying his father as a hero at the very end, trying to save his daughter, and also just totally Milton, because why is he going over the side? Because he was so pissed off that he was going to lose money to that jerk, you know, his brother-in-law. Yeah, so, you know, there's that little bit. Milton was purely Milton at the very, very end, and Cal honors him almost, I think, in that way. Doesn't walk away from the complication that is his father.
And that passage was like exactly why I felt that Milton would never really like reconcile with the fact that Cal was Cal, Because first of all, like he says, he's crying over the fact that he couldn't save Calliope. And I think that even if Cal had come back from San Francisco, Milton for the rest of his life would have been like, I couldn't save Calliope. You know, my daughter is gone. And then at the very, like when he says his last thought before he dies wasn't about Tessie or Cal, it was about how he had like messed up. And I think he would have always interpreted Cal's condition as his mess up, like he should have done something.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it simplifies things that he's gone, for sure. And Cal knows this. And I think, I keep thinking about Tessie too. I think the reason why Tessie could accept her son is because Milton wasn't there. If Milton were there and he couldn't accept it, Tessie would have felt torn, right? Between being with her husband and obeying him, you know, or at least sympathizing with him, but then having Cal who wants to be a man, you know. And so I think Tessie would have been torn apart a lot more had Milton stayed alive. I think it would have been harder for her too, for sure. Yeah, so necessary, maybe bittersweet for sure, and sort of symbolic. Freud has this theory that at least symbolically young men need to quote unquote kill off their fathers in order to become a man, and so this is playing into some more Western mythology. You see this even a lot of Greek mythology, that the heroes have to kill off their father figure in order to become the hero. You even see that in like Star Wars. I hate to bring it up, but you know, you have almost every character taking that step towards manhood for either the dark side or the light side, killing off their fathers. Do you see that, everyone? Yeah, it's like one of those stages of becoming a hero. And it happens here. So, yep, more Greek mythology. All right, and then let's, one of the last, whoop, 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 whoop. Come on, little thing. There we go. And then for the last, okay, so how did you feel about Cal's struggle with gender identity? Do you think Zora and working in the strip club made him more accepting towards himself? Can you point out the moments when, again, traveling with such mentors allowed Cal to resolve his feelings of being a freak or abnormal? And what do you think Zora means when she tells Cal why she doesn't hide her intersex condition? I want people to know, Cal, because we're what's next. Like, how did you all interpret that? We're what's next. What does that mean to you?
So what I thought that she meant by that was she was kind of explaining to Cal like that there's always going to be someone that's intersex. It's becoming more prominent. It's happening more, like we're what's next, we're what's to become. And she was kind of like helping Cal come to terms that like, he's not a monster, which is what he saw in the dictionary, and that like there were other people like him, like he's not alone. And I think that honestly, like the strip club and Zora and Carmen and all the other girls that he met helped him to come to terms that he wasn't alone in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zora being, you know, XY, but appearing to be like the perfect female, big breasts, very tall,
Yeah.
very thin. And it's true that a lot of supermodels are actually XY, androgen insensitive males, which is kind of weird to think about, right? Like what we consider to be like the epitome of female beauty, many of them are actually XY males. I don't know what that means, but it messes with my head a little bit. So absolutely, and you're saying we're what's next because perhaps genetically speaking, intersex people are becoming more visible, but also just more prevalent. Any of you take it that way, that
Yeah,
we're what's
exactly.
next, like genetically speaking?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. How about anybody else? How did you interpret that line? We are what's next.
I think one of the cool things about Zora is that she exposed Cal to like the history of his condition, you know, because he's felt like a freak for his whole life, whatever. He's like, I'm alone in this. And he even talks about like the biggest impact that Zora had on his life was showing him that he was not alone. And to me, the like we're what's next line is she's not talking about like there's going to be more of us in the future. Like it's not about like the quantity, I feel like, of the numbers, but I feel like she's expressing like we're not going to be hidden away anymore. Like this isn't, we're not going to be like this category of people anymore. Especially when she's talking about different cultures that like raise these people up, and you know they're the healers, the leaders of whatever. I think that is what like she wants for them, and she sees that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the last Zoom, right? That this was happening in 1974, right? And we're 2020, and you can start to see the opening up, for better or for worse. I know some people are like, this is horrible, but you can see the opening up of now discussions about people who are non-binary, people who are trans, people who who want to be using maybe like a they pronoun. That we're starting as a society to see this kind of opening up and awareness of people who don't fit into these comfortable binary categories of male or female. Does that make sense? And that intersex on a biological level, they don't fit in neatly and nicely into the male or female binary biological sex. And so I think, you know, in some ways, Zora writing her book and having this idea of the history and the cultural awareness is saying that I think, Zoe, what you're saying, and we can kind of see that. I mean, she was to some degree foreseeing the direction that many cultures are going into now, into being more open and cognizant and aware that people exist outside of this binary male, female, gender / biological sex system. And so in some ways she's predicting us, you know, she's predicting the readers of this novel. That we are also, all of us in this class, we are also what's next, right? And as you're raising your own children, some of you might have your own children, or people you know who have children who are intersex. You might have children. I know both of my children identify outside of the binary system, and it's interesting. It's because I'm like in a whole new world. I'm like, I grew up in the 70s. Like like this is all new to me, but it's also exciting, and it's also different, and it also feels important. Yeah, so I like that too. It just seems like what she's telling him is there will be a place for us. Maybe there has been in the past, in different cultures and different histories, and there will be again. And then I think, Zoe, that gives them a sense of hope and belonging too, right? She's also the first one on page 489 to tell him sex is biological, gender is cultural. And so if, you know, he is worried, Cal is worried about presenting as female and then presenting as male, I think she helps him kind of navigate that really well. Too, that again, gender doesn't have to be something that is essential to your nature. It can be something you kind of try on, you know, try it on, see what fits. Okay, so what about that moment what about presto? What about, okay, because usually, honestly, everybody, if I thought that my 14-year-old kid was going to travel to San Francisco and meet a guy like Presto, who Cal calls an exploiter, a porn dog, and a sex pig, and then work in a place called, what did they call them? Like 69ers? What was this place called?
I think it was the 69ers.
Yeah. And get naked in front of people and swim around. I probably would be like completely horrified as a parent. But a lot of you in the discussion board talked about how this was this was in many ways the best place Cal could have ended up. Can you please defend your position? Because again, I have a 14-year-old. Well, she's 15 now. And the thought of her going here, you know, fills me with the horror. But tell me, why was this almost a great place for Cal to end up? I'm not sure I'm seeing it. Lily, please.
You're talking about like the strip club, right? Like how like some people are saying that's the best place he ended up in San Francisco.
Yeah. Even though
Okay.
it's like,
I think this is the best place. Yeah, yeah. Well, the place I think is the best place for him merely because the place was they wanted to show off their bodies. So they were like idolizing their bodies and people found like beauty and they wanted to like admire them. And this was kind of a place where Cal could realize like it isn't wrong to be that way. It isn't wrong to be intersex. Like it was kind of almost like I guess like a hideaway, like kind of like a safe place. And I feel like he found safety there through the people that he met and like what he learned about his history and how other cultures like saw him and identified other intersex people as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think Lily, what you're saying is so crucial that, you know, and I think this is happening with Cal too, through his romantic relationships, right? Especially with Julie. It's one of the reasons why Cal, very often that last step of taking off his underpants, of being naked in front, because there's something that happens when you're completely naked in front of somebody. And it's like the most vulnerable position you can be in. And if you have fears about your body, if you have, if you're feeling disgusted by your body, but when naked, another person is looking at you with just unfiltered desire, there's something that's kind of magical about that. I mean, I hate to say that in some ways because like it means that you know, I don't want to sound like you can only accept yourself if other people can accept you, but there is something that's beautiful. I mean, think about Celie. Think about Celie and her own body and how she thinks of it differently when she has, you know, sexual romantic feelings for Shug. Does that make sense, everybody? That there's that is important to be looked at, to have the gaze, to have the look, and that look to be one of desire and the one of awe and not one of disgust.
Right.
Yeah, there's something that is beautiful in that moment. So I want to read this paragraph that happens on New Year's Eve and what happens, because it's kind of, I mean, it's, again, as a mother, I'm kind of like, ah, and then as a reader, I can sympathize. Once upon a time in ancient Greece, there was an enchanted pool. I could do it in my sleep now. I was asleep considering our backstage festivities, the flowing Averna, the tranquilizing smoke. Halloween had come and gone, Thanksgiving too, and then Christmas. On New Year's, Bob Presto threw a big party. Zora and I drank champagne. When it was time for my act, I plunged into the pool. I was high, drunk, and so that night did something I didn't normally do. I opened my eyes underwater. I saw the faces looking back at me, and I saw that they too were not appalled. I had fun in the tank that night. It was all beneficial in some way. It was therapeutic. Inside, Hermaphroditus' old tensions were roiling, trying to work themselves out. Traumas of the locker room were being released. Shame over having a body unlike other bodies was passing away. The monster feeling was fading. Along with shame and self-loathing, another hurt was healing. Hermaphroditus was beginning to forget about the obscure object. And so here in this moment, and again, if we're going to go back to Greek mythology, to this even, I don't know if you guys have ever studied different thinkers, but the stages of hero or heroic stages, especially in Greek mythology, usually the hero goes to the underworld. It goes to like a second womb and is reborn. And here you can see this, right? Here you can see literally a tank, literally, I mean, how much womb-like can we get, right? And he goes in as a monster and comes out as something transformed, right? Goes in feeling shame and comes out feeling a little bit more normal, a little bit more beautiful. And that's exactly when the cops come in and he goes back home. But I'm glad he had that moment before he had to face his family again. A moment where maybe, just maybe, he'll be able to find somebody who appreciates and thinks his body is beautiful and not a monstrosity. just great.
Yeah, like you said, obviously I'm not a mother, but like reading that part, there's like half of me that was like, yay, like I'm so happy for him. You know, he's finally seeing that like people do desire him and like that's a possibility. And then the other half is like, oh my gosh, like he's 14 or 15, I remember, and like this is exploitation, like this is terrible. And I think that opens up like a larger conversation about sex work, because obviously this was a very liberating and empowering experience for Cal. It really changed how he viewed himself, but at the same time, you know, there was someone profiting off of that, and he was very clearly being exploited. So it's kind of hard to look at those scenes, and you wonder, even as Cal is like reflecting back on that time of his life, whether he has really felt the like impact of that exploitation. Like, does he really understand? Like, I don't know. It was like definitely hard to read because you want to root for him, but you're also like, this is terrible. Like, how can we see this as like a good moment?
I feel the same way, Zoe. And then a couple semesters ago, I had a student who was gay and said that this sex club, the strip club, reminded him a lot of like gay cabaret clubs and other sort of sex clubs that he had visited as a young gay teen who had absolutely no idea what was going on and was very much afraid of coming out to his parents, who were very religious and very conservative. And he felt the same way Cal did in these like clubs that were clearly not for 14-year-olds, you know. But he said that there's a kind of camaraderie and a kind of community, and that straight people often do look at them in sort of like, how can that be a healthy thing? But for many, those type of situations is a safe place for them to explore these quote unquote like deviant bodies or deviant sexualities or deviant identities, for better or for worse. And but still he was drinking, he was smoking, and I don't know how would this novel have gone had he stayed for another 6 months or another year, Zoe, right? Like at some, you know, it wasn't a entirely safe environment for him.
Yeah, I think the relationships that he formed with Zora, and I'm completely forgetting the other girl's name, but I thought those were very healthy relationships because they were both older than him and they both had sort of a like mentor relationship with him, and they showed him a lot of things that really helped him accept himself. But the addition of Bob Prost, was it? Who is this man? Like Cal is going through the most transformative period of his life. You know, he's discovering all these things, he's accepting himself, and there's still this middle-aged dude who's profiting off of his body.
Yes.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I love Zora. This is good for him. And then at the same time, you're like, this other dude is terrible.
And if we remember, you know, we can kind of apply this to, I think, Zoe, you brought this up in your test, Patricia Collins's hegemonic masculinity, that very often, because, you know, marginalized people find respect and community and camaraderie in marginalized spaces. Does that make sense? And so this is one of the only spaces that intersex people could form a community, or people with, again, deviant sexualities or deviant, you know, and I'm using deviant, hopefully you're not hearing me say deviant in like this pejorative sense, like deviant just meaning like not within the norm, right? That this is one of the, and sex clubs during the 80s and 70s were one of the only places where gays and homosexuals could hang out. Does that make sense? Like, because they were pushed into the margins. They couldn't necessarily, you know, they couldn't go to golf clubs. You know what I mean? There weren't a whole lot of safe spaces for queer people, and certainly not intersex people. This is one of the only ones. And so you're absolutely right. How do you see it? I don't know. He does say that everything about Bob Presto, that he was a sex dog, he was an exploiter, everything else. But he said that he he could have done worse. That even though Presto was all of these things, he was also necessary for Cal to find himself. And so it's, I don't know, like you said, this is on page 483. Presto was an exploiter, a porn dog, a sex pig, but I could have done worse. Without him, I might never have found myself. So I don't know. But you can see, again, if people aren't accepted into quote unquote mainstream society, if they don't have a place, they will find their community, but it'll be in more dangerous and marginalized positions. They will find that respect, but it'll be pushed to the underground. It'll be pushed into, you know, more dangerous areas, just like for many African Americans, if they are not accepted into, you know, they can't reach hegemonic status, they will find it, but in often marginalized and very dangerous ways and places. So you can see that happening here.
Yeah, it definitely makes the case for like why. So if you refuse to provide safe spaces for marginalized people, you're not going to like erase their identity. Like if you refuse to accept or provide accepting spaces for your gay child, that's not going to make them not gay. It's going to make them seek out mentorship and support in those spaces, but in areas that aren't safe and that are damaging and that are unhealthy. And so it definitely made the case for, you know, Cal is saying like this was so transformative. It was dangerous. Like he acknowledges that this dude was a terrible guy. And he's like, but you know, he wouldn't have found it anywhere else. If there had been a safe space, it would have been super beneficial for him, but there wasn't a safe space.
And I think you're absolutely right, Zoe. And I think it's, again, another reason I love teaching this novel is that, you know, I hope what literature does for me is that it helps me identify and empathize with people I would never otherwise know. I don't know what it's like to be somebody, a woman walking around in dark skin, but by reading The Color Purple for those moments, I see life through the eyes of people and who aren't like me. And for those moments, it makes other realities more real. And like you said, it's harder to dismiss those realities, and it's harder to say, oh, well, you know, your experiences aren't valid or don't count. And I think you're absolutely right. As a society, if we don't start accepting people and allowing people a sense of community, then that is what ends up happening. Kelly, yeah, chime in.
I wanted to ask you a question. It's not off topic, but have you ever seen this show called Pose?
No. Tell me
Okay,
about
so it kind of it's kind of like on topic with with like Cal's situation. So it's like a group of people that like were kicked out of their homes. I think it was based like in the 1970s. Men that were kicked out boys that were kicked out of their home for being gay. Some that were trying to like be transgender and stuff. Like a lot of them end up being homeless and on the streets. And you had these transgenders as well that were like, they were called like house mothers, and they would take those individuals in to keep them from off the street and stuff like that. And I think if something like that existed, like while Cal, you know, was going through his journey, it definitely would have been very beneficial.
Yeah. And what is that title again? Pose, did you say?
Pose, yes, Pose.
Pose. Got it. All right, I'm looking that up. That sounds amazing. Thank you, because
You're welcome.
I'm always looking. During Christmas, I can actually watch TV, and I'm like, what can I watch? Yeah, thank you all. Are there any other questions or concerns? Anything else that you want to talk about in this novel, about the whole novel? Anything that you've observed? Now's the time to speak or forever hold your peace. And let me just ask, let me throw this question out, because I really am curious. It's going to be on the test for extra credit, well, not extra, for points. Out of the works that we've read for the class, which meant the most to you? What reading experience did you find most meaningful for whatever reason? Notice I don't say easiest, or that you like the most, but that you found most meaningful. And if I teach this again next semester, which I will, what should I keep? What should go? Just throwing that out real quick. I already kind of know I'm gonna try to organize things a little bit differently. But in terms of the readings, what do you think?
For me, the reading that was the most significant to me would definitely be The Color Purple, only because I could relate more to like the issues about like colorism, rape, like in a household, like women that girls growing up in a household like without their biological father, that gives room for like mothers' boyfriends or that comes into the household and those type of situations. So I could definitely relate to The Color Purple more. So that one's very significant to me.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Kelly.
For me, it was this last book because, like it was just a reminder for every day for us to respect others, because just like you were talking, Professor, we never know how it is to be another person. And we will probably never know. So I really like this last book.
I've never found one where, I mean, some of you are so, I love it on the discussion boards and they're like, I never knew this. Like, I didn't know about Liberian. I didn't know about Firestone. I didn't know about this or that. And I'm going, amen. I didn't know about either until I read these novels. So at least you're getting this now at 19, 20, 21. I didn't get it until I was in my 30s, that I'm discovering all this that was never taught, especially intersex conditions. I had no idea, honestly, none at all, until I read this book. So if you're feeling like, oh, I actually learned something, that's a good thing. That's good.
I think the balance of books, like all three of the books that we've read in this class, you can make connections between all of them. And they all kind of center around, obviously, like the main theme of the class. But I think they're all very different and they're all very different perspectives and they all have very different like minor themes. So I think it's a really good like spread of books for the class. I never thought like reading any of them, I'm like, we already did this. It was like all new stuff.
Yeah, good. So you're saying all three, keep all three.
Yes.
And how about, Lily?
I agree with Zoe as well. Yeah, I agree with Zoe as well. Each one of them, that's why I didn't say anything, because I honestly can't pick which one I directly favorite the most or anything like that, because I pulled something from each one of them and I thought they centered the class really well.
Okay, great, good. I know, I just want to congratulate all of you, because I know I threw a lot of reading at you. There's a lot of reading in this class, and you all handle it so brilliantly. And again, you're teaching me how to see these novels in new ways, and I think that's amazing. And I know this semester has not been easy for any of us. We've been dealing with a pandemic. We've been dealing with our health of people around us, like the deterioration of our democracy. I mean, like a lot of stuff has been happening these last, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, oh my God. So I just want to give a shout out. You guys have been amazing and wonderful. And thank you for going through this crazy last few months with me. If you get a chance, please go to the course evaluation and fill out any information there about what you think I should keep, what I shouldn't, how I can make the class better. This is the first time I taught this class in an online setting, so I know I didn't do things perfectly, and I'm already thinking about ways I can make it better next semester. You guys were my guinea pigs, so I appreciate it, and I'm sorry at the same time. But the test will be available on Tuesday, anytime until Friday, and you've got until Friday midnight to get that essay in or that project. Even if you need more time than that, let's say you really need the weekend, let me know. I can extend it. I've got Monday and Tuesday to grade. So as long as you get it in by Monday, I'll take it then too. So if any of you are like just at the brink of like being fried, you can get the weekend as well. All right. All right, y'all are wonderful. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself and stay safe. And Mary, go outside and hug a cow for me, if you wouldn't mind.
I will do.
Excellent. All right, y'all, take care.
All right, thank you.
Have a good life.
No.